And my special guest this evening is Jon Storm. And Jon is a regular guest on my show and always has profound wisdom to share with us involving the craft and an infinite amount of multifaceted subjects. And here's his quick bio. Jon was born in 1953 in a family of hereditary witches that count their ancestry all too many centuries ago in ancient Terra. He was raised and trained in the craft as the only male witch in his family by his grandmother and his grandchildren, and he does have grandchildren of his own. He began serious martial arts training in 1963, and his sensei became his father figure. He strove for perfection, holding a second-degree black belt in Mas Oya-mas Karate and a master's ranking in Chinese Kenpo. By the early 1970s, between training for tournaments and running his own small chain of studios, he took radio and TV broadcasting at El Paso Community College in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This gave Jon his first taste of journalism. 30-plus years later, and dying to write some of these experiences in a book, he wrote an entire series in the Witch Clan theme. And these are character-driven stories with true-to-life characters and experiences melded into an entertaining fantasy. And his first full-length novel in this series is The Matriarch of the Witch Clan. And he and his family sponsor and are also registered as Witches of the World at the Witch's Voice, which is witchbox.com. And, of course, that can be found in their archives. And Jon is currently working on his book in progress, which is called Practical Witchery. And that's available for free on Bookrix. And I think they're doing some renovation on Bookrix right now. You can get in there, but I haven't noticed the book. But it's there somewhere, so just give it a little time in the illusion of. And also, for a long time, Jon kept his MK Ultra exposure kind of low-key. These days, he is a prime example of someone who has been able to navigate out of the material hells created by handlers and is a prime example of how mind control has failed against the nature of one's immortal soul and spirit. And please welcome Jon to the show this evening. Hi, Jon.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Not too bad.
Well, good. You sound good. You sound better than the last time I talked to you. Things are slowly improving, right?
They are.
Good.
And, remarkably so. I really, last summer, I really didn't anticipate living this long. I didn't figure I'd live long enough to see Christmas.
Aw, yeah, I don't want to hear that. But you know what? Yeah, I don't think it's your time.
It actually turned around. Which is kind of a beautiful and remarkable thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was listeners to a lot of these shows that actually, sent me supplements for different things. My diabetes injections were getting to, ridiculous levels of injections. It's like shoving a golf ball into your stomach. The dosages are so large. And every time I see the doctor, the dosages would get larger and larger and larger. And it's like sooner or later, there's going to be like no pancreas or nothing left. Mm-hmm. And I'm taking these supplements now, this gymnasium, and this is stuff listeners have sent me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
As of last summer, and my dosages are lowering now, and I'll be seeing the doctor next week. I think he's going to be really surprised. I think this is going to be the only time I've gone in the last couple of years that the dosages haven't increased.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, it's a very remarkable thing.
So what exactly are you taking that's actually helping? Which one is it?
Actually, I'm taking a bunch of things. I was in pain with my muscles all the time for the last couple of years. It's just getting worse and worse and cramped up. And she's just a little magnesium, calcium, potassium. Got that to kind of ease up. The coconut oil Roger and Lahila told me to take was curing up. And I guess this happens a lot to diabetics, but my doctor really wasn't interested in curing me or helping me at all. And, never told me anything about it. I tell him, look, I ache so bad, it's terrible. You want something for the pain? No, I don't want something that's going to make me dopey.
Right, a placebo. Yeah.
Yeah, and all I needed was the minerals that the medications were taking out of my muscles, and Candida was just, everything. It was just infiltrating every muscle and fiber of me, and just making me absolutely miserable. And that seems to be clearing up now.
That's awesome.
Starting to firm up a little bit.
I saw your photo. You look great. You're looking much better.
Yeah, I look better than I am. like I say, the muscle's back, but it's not the kind of muscle I had. I'm kind of used to living my life as an ultra. You know, it's like muscles hard as mahogany, and it's kind of squishy now.
That's interesting. Do you think some of the wear and tear was probably some of the technological stuff you had done to you, but also I've heard that chemtrails are also taking the minerals out of the body. Have you heard that?
It might well be, but you know, with the help of a few friends, I'm actually putting them back in, and
excellent.
It is making a difference. My organs and my heart kind of took a bit of wear and tear from all of this, but the kind of life that I've lived, I mean, no way in hell I should have survived to be this old.
You're not that old,
and they didn't really want us to anyway.
Right. Well, yeah, there seems to be a limited lifespan when it comes down to MK Ultra, the hardcore. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it is. You know, I was in my mid-20s, and they were setting me up for the kill. Figured I outlived my usefulness, or you know, after the more you start catching on and understanding, the harder it is to make some of the things work that they control you with. It's so, you know, they figure, well, they'll get rid of you before you turn bad. So my last 3 missions that I ran on, somebody obviously sold me out because they were waiting for me and knew which direction I'd be coming from before I got there.
What year was that, John?
That was in about 77, 78.
Wow, yeah, so that was some time ago then.
I'm an old codger now.
You're not that old. I mean, you're only like, 11 years older than me. Seriously, you have some time left in the illusion of. I think we're all like, you know, considering what's going on with the planet, you know, we'll just see how far we all get, I guess, insofar as how long we're all going to live.
But I think I was made to kind of burn out quicker, and I'm surprised they didn't burn out quite as quick.
Yeah, you seem pretty strong.
Well, those pictures of me, the videos of me knocking down trees, that was me just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
About 3 or 4 years ago, you know, in my late 50s. And I was doing good, you know, picking up big old logs and tossing them around the woods, and, you know, I mean, I felt it a little more than I did when I was younger, but not so much so. But, you know, earlier this week, I was just kind of standing around in a parking lot, and the guy's got a small pickup, and I just tried picking up the back end of the pickup, and I could barely get the tires off the damn ground. So, I mean, it's not like I used to be. I could have flipped that thing over on its top just a couple of years ago. So, like I say, the muscle looks good, but it's not the same kind of muscle that they produced in me when I was younger, to use like electroshocks and stuff to kind of like for hours on end when they'd have me in there, and you know, it's like this pulsing electricity would cause the muscles to flex in different groups, you know, different pads, and that made the muscles not really big but very, very hard and dense. I've been stabbed a number of times, and it's even kind of hard to pass a knife through those things, but like I say, they're kind of soft and squishy now. I've never had a body that reacted this way that I have now, so it's very, very confusing and hard for me to adjust to.
Right. Well, I think part of it, like you were saying, is the medication they've been putting you on is probably just completely just trashing your system to some degree. So I'm kind of glad that you're getting away from some of that. And also, when you're talking about the pulsing electricity, now you're the original MK Ultra, and in the old days, they used to take you in a room and pretty much, you know, torture you with all sorts of different devices. Is that correct? Insofar as nowadays it's more psychotronic. I mean, it's remotely tactical hardware. You know, they don't pull you in a room physically anymore.
They do things. They found some cheaper ways of accomplishing kind of some of the things that they wanted. Now, you know, they had like over 150 programs. I'm a first generation MK Ultra. When shortly after I was born, for the 13th. My mom put me up for adoption. She was a single mom, and I was a boy, and they only trained girls in the craft and in our family. And so she put me up for adoption. And you know, back then, you know, being a single mom was like a stoning offense. So you know, she thought I'd be with some nuns, and hey, who ready to adopt some bouncing baby, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. But that's not what happened. I was among the first infants that were inducted into the MK Ultra programs. Mm-hmm. And the first 18 months of my life, I was taken care of by nuns and Nazi doctors who scarred my brain stem to try to give me an eidetic memory, photographic memory to increase my IQ, mm-hmm. which is a very painful thing, and a lot of infants did not survive it or did not survive it in any way that they could survive outside of an institution.
Right.
Then there was all the diseases that they gave me. I had every disease. I had rubella, I had scarlet fever. My chances of to look like surviving that first 18 months weren't great. Mm-hmm. They lost more children than they actually kept, and they didn't care. Mm-hmm. As I got older, they started the bone hardening, where they do microfracturing, and it causes the calcium to build up in your bones. It makes your bones denser and thicker. Mm-hmm. They gotta strengthen your bones before they can make your muscles, I say super strong, and people start thinking of Superman, and it's not quite that, or it certainly wasn't for first generation. Mm-hmm. But what they do is they hook up these pads. They were kind of like wet felt pads with rubber straps, and they were hooked to electrodes, and they'd be on different muscle groups, and you'd be strapped down on this table. And they had this, and these wires would go to this thing and look like a suitcase sitting on a table. And they'd adjust the duration of the pulses of the electricity and how many amps and volts and stuff would go in, how long it would stay with the electricity on, and there would be a pause in between it. It was like one big full body clinch you'd go into for about 15 seconds, and then it'd let you, then the electricity would stop for about 15, 30 seconds, and then back on again. And this would go on for like 2-3 hours at a time.
Jeez.
But your muscles would, it's like your whole body's flexing. I mean, mm-hmm. tighter than you can imagine. But those muscles, they wouldn't get really big, but they get very dense and strong. Mm-hmm. And when I was probably about 14 or 15 and like about 150 pounds soaking wet, I went to a junkyard with a friend. We were just kind of testing how strong we were. My friend Hubert, we used to call him the Goon because he looked like a little Hercules, and I looked like a tall, skinny beanpole. And we found this Renault station wagon, and it was full of like sheet metal and stuff like that. And we said, well, let's flip it over on its top. It's not going to hurt anybody or anything else. We just kind of two boys with a lot of testosterone and figured we're going to try out our strength and see what we can do. Mm-hmm. And we both pick up on the side of it, and he cut his hand under the bumper. There was some sharp metal there, so he let go, and I was still holding the Renault by myself, and I just kind of continued pushing. I thought Hubert was helping, and I continued pushing the thing over onto its top. I had it up and flipped it over onto its top. By myself, and that was a good amount of strength. Shortly after that, I helped my Uncle Dick change a flat tire on his '53 Dodge pickup. He didn't have a jack, so I held up the truck. It's not like I picked it up like up off the ground over my head. I just took up one side and held it up for him. Mm-hmm. We changed the tire, and Duncan, I think, is a bit stronger. He can deadlift about 1,000 pounds. I can pick up several hundred anyway. I don't think I can go full half ton, but
still pretty darn good. So the technology now, some of the stuff they were doing with the shocking with you, was that electroshock therapy?
Yeah, but they didn't do that on my head. They did the brain scarring, and when that worked, it gave me the eidetic memory. I was a good remote viewer. I was an excellent remote viewer. So I was good with the strength and the martial arts skills and the remote viewer. I made a great kind of hunter, seeker, assassin. Mm-hmm. people say super soldiers. I thought they were training me as a super spy, really. It was like a man from Uncle type scenario for me.
Mm-hmm. Take the
so
best of your abilities.
I didn't object over much to, and some of it, I didn't ask for it, but I felt a little bit better back then about some of it anyhow. Made me a little more malleable, you might say. I got straight A's in school, kind of a prodigy. I wrote music, did a bunch of things, and then they'd take me all to all these places and show me off. And
it's amazing. But there's an insidious side to it as well, obviously. And
it was insidious all the way. I recognized the sigils on their rings immediately because, like I say, after about 18 months, my grandma kind of got me. And like I say, she raised me in her house. I'm the only male witch that family has ever trained. Because I was adept. I had the abilities in that, and she figured I'd just go crazy, and this power and this stuff would mess me up.
Right.
If she didn't train me, the proper discipline, how to use it, how to cope with it. And I'm so glad she did. There were terrible things that happened to me, but there was remarkable good things that kind of held me together.
Well, it sounds like she was kind of an angel on your shoulder,
Yeah, well, that's even happening today, like I say, with the people that sent me the supplements and stuff, and the way things are going. The government's messing me over with my disability. I'm supposed to be hearing from that soon. My lawyer said I should have been getting paid for that as of last August, but anything they can do to mess with me or hold back on me, they'll do, and they always do. It's never any different. People say, you're just a pessimist. It's like, no, I'm a realist. I'm 62 years old, and I've never known it to be any different.
Right, it's predictable. Evil is very predictable as well.
It is. They're not as creative as they like to make themselves believe they are. Generally, they use the same old tactics they've used for hundreds of years.
Yep, and the mass mind control.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it's about, is this manipulation in a very subliminal way to some degree, but then a lot of it's in your face. Now, why didn't they give you compensation for damages? Have you ever even tried to get compensation for all the years of that torturous avenue?
I can't even get the disability that I've been paying into since I was 13 years old.
So wrong.
And I am definitely disabled. I'm a mess.
What about your x-rays? I mean, can you use some of that? I know you had some anomalies. Was it an x-ray or an MRI?
I can't get an honest doctor. Well, maybe it's not a matter of being honest. I'm pretty sure they're being leaned on because most of these places get government funding. And anything that's attached to the government at all, the government just leans on them. Hey, we'll pull this, we'll pull that. You don't do what we say. And, I've shown those things to a couple different neurologists, and they talk around the white spots. Now, when I talked to my lawyer, I says, I got these MRIs, and he says, well, that's just a matter of looking for the white spots on the. I said, there's some very interesting white spots on my MRIs. He says, what did he say? I said, strangely enough, he didn't say anything about him. I showed him the report. He talks about the things that aren't there. Well, there's no swelling in the hippocampus and all this other kind of stuff, but he doesn't say a word about the little white spots, and some of them are unmistakably artificial. Right. And that amazes me. I anticipated maybe a little, one on the outside somewhere the size of a grain of rice or something like that would be fairly easy to stick in during one of my several hospitalizations or last year or something like that. But, I was in there in the 1950s, and I got hardware that you see these little 8-space dots on the MRIs, evenly spaced apart. And it is down, you're looking at a slice about level with my eyes. You can see my eyeball like split in half at the front of the MRI, and you see these dots in my brain. So that places these things somewhere in the center of my brain, spread across it. Absolutely inoperable. If you had the slightest little tumor in there, they couldn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And how did they get these things in there?
Right.
And in my generation, and without me knowing about it, because I didn't know they were in there until I saw them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, sometimes
and there's
it's...
a number of other things in there that they're very obvious, too.
Right. I'm wondering what year they hit you with that, because a lot of it's done through transmission now and signals, and they don't need to have an implant, so to speak. It's all signal anomaly, too. And, I mean, you'd be surprised at what they can do. You'd be surprised.
I'm amazed at, and those, like I said, had to have been in there some time ago. I haven't even been unconscious or anything in a good many years.
Mm-hmm.
I had some knee surgery back in '97, but like I say, this had to have been in there for some time. I didn't believe it was humanly possible.
Yeah.
I had when I was 6 years old seen graves. I mean, up close and personal. I wouldn't necessarily call it an abduction, at least what I remember of it. It was just an encounter. It was a surprise to me. The first time it seemed like a surprise to them. The second time, I don't know what the hell it was about. I really don't. I remember what was there, but I don't understand why or what it was about. I just know I seen them. I know it was there. My mom used to keep this suitcase. She used to call it the boneyard. And like when I made my little handprint in clay when I was in kindergarten, she's got that in there. But my little pictures that I tried to draw of Zorro up on the rooftops and stuff, she's got those pictures. And when I started doing little superhero things when I was about 7 or 6 or 7, I drew a little guy who was supposed to be from Saturn. And I named him Quote Frome. I still remember the name, and he was a little fellow with a big head and large black oval eyes and a little slit of a mouth, and he could turn invisible, and just his eyes would be visible. And she had these pictures, and I remember back in the early '90s, I saw a picture of the cover of Whitley Strieber's Communion, and I saw, wow, I've seen these before. And, that was the first time I knew that other people had, I really didn't pay attention to a lot of that stuff. A lot of this stuff I put on the back burner. I mean, when I was a kid, I try to tell people, hey, they're conditioning me and trying to train me as a spy. And, you got to tell your friends this is exciting stuff. And, Johnny, you can do the strangest things, yeah, I could, I was very strong for my size and very, very fast and very, very intelligent. And I remember everything. I mean, all the way back to the day I was born. It doesn't mean I understood everything. I just remember.
Right.
So I'm wondering if they had something to do with putting this crap in my head, or
well, yeah,
and what it does.
I mean, what's interesting, John, is that we haven't gotten into this before when you've been on the show. Now, we've talked about the MK Ultra and the other things that you've done, but the contactee aspect of it, if that's what it was, but if you're having an encounter as a child with a gray or something that's not necessarily from this planet, then that's a strong indicator that, yeah, you were probably a contactee and tracked by government, because they're notorious for tracking government as well. I mean, government's notorious for tracking contactees, excuse me. So that goes hand in hand, as we all know. So a lot of us...
Well, that was in Riverside, California. For a couple of years, they were trying me out for the MK Monarch. So Disney was building Disneyland back then, and MK Monarch was just starting up and starting to go full steam. And I didn't work out. They got my... See, I was treated in Rochester, New York, at the University of Rochester Medical Center, Building 400. That's the same building that did the Manhattan Project. It's run by the CIA. And it's top secret, and it's still there, still operating to this day. But it also, after the Manhattan Project, they were doing human experimentation, injecting plutonium and radioactive isotopes into people that came into the hospital, Strong Hospital there in Rochester, without their knowledge, without their consent, just to see what it would do. Mm-hmm. And and then later on they said, well, they stopped that. They did MK Ultra, and I was a part of that, and that's where I went. Now, later on in the 50s, about the mid-50s and mid to late 50s, they gave my stepdad a job at Roar Aircraft in Riverside, California. So we all moved out to California, and I start seeing the pediatricians out there, and that was part of NK Monarch. Hey, I was a good-looking, very intelligent, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. You know, this was the American dream, you know. Riverside was a brand-new suburb, you know, and they were going to kind of groom me to be some kind of celebrity or something like that. I don't know. But it didn't work out because when they got to the sexual abuse thing, violence was my trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Hurting somebody or something like that, that was my trigger. That made me violent. Mm-hmm. And I reacted violently. This one boy was trying to convince this girl who, I don't want to call her a girlfriend because it wasn't like a romantic thing. It's kind of like, look, I had sisters and stuff, and you know, and I'm friends with girls just as easy as I'm friends with boys. I mean, I'm not sexually confused or anything. I'm just kind of balanced that way. Mm-hmm. Blame my grandma or somebody for it, but it's not a bad thing. And he's trying to get her to take her pants off, and I popped him right in the schnoz. And even at 5 or 6, I was very strong. I broke his nose. Good. And when somebody else tried something, I reacted again violently when they did it to me. And I actually hurt people when I hit people. Mm-hmm. So they said, well, that's not going to work out. So my stepdad got laid off from War Aircraft, hated me for it. Because it didn't work out because I was violent. And we went back to Rochester and back to Building 400. But it was while I was that couple of years there in California, the first episode of My Sea in a Gray is I was in first grade at Terrace Elementary School there in Riverside, California. And they used to have this little incinerator. They'd have like two long buildings for the school, and in between them was a playground, swing set, sandbox, multi-bars, and, you know, stuff like that, mm-hmm. and teeter-totters. And at the end of that, at the far end of that, before the fence, there was this little picture like a large brick barbecue, except it was an incinerator, and it was closed in. Had a little wall, and we'd sometimes use that. We were playing kind of, I don't know, you can't call it cowboys and Indians. There was 2 boys and 2 girls. Me, a boy named Dick Benedict, Jeannie Robinson, and Jeannie Black. I still even remember everybody's names. This was 6 years old. And the girls were kind of chasing us with their jump ropes, and then they kind of tie us up with the jump rope. Nothing kinky or anything like that. And they take you to the jail, and generally that was the area is walled behind the incinerator. It's just a short little wall, and that where they'd store the bags, and they'd burn them. You know, the janitor would burn them. It wasn't lit or anything going on that day, and I had a false memory, and I remember us coming around the corner around the wall behind this incinerator, and seeing this little girl that looked a lot like Jeannie Black, and she's sitting with one of those paper leaf or plastic leaf bags, mm-hmm. like she's holding it over her, covering herself with it, and she's crying and whimpering. But it couldn't have been Jeannie Black because she was still chasing Dick Benedict around over by the monkey bars, trying to catch him with her jump rope. And Jeannie Robinson had me behind the incinerator there to kind of put me in the jail. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a strange memory because I'm looking at Jeannie Robinson, and Jeannie Robinson's, you know, as I look on the other side of the wall, there's Jeannie Robinson still chasing Dick around the playground. And it's kind of like, that's not right. And every time I close my eyes, that's not what I'd see. I'd see the little gray guy with the big eyes, holding, he looked like he was injured or afraid, or that's the impression I got. And I wasn't going to hurt him or nothing. I wasn't going to hurt anybody. You know, I was only violent if somebody did something violent. Mm-hmm. They're
Right.
just regular people. Hey, I want to be as sweet as can be. I like being friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I was a Bambi kind of kid. I wasn't a roughneck or a bully. But it was probably a few weeks or a few months after that. I can't be absolutely sure about how much time passed, but it wasn't a lot. I was across the street. There was a Mexican family that lived across the street, the Meguias. And me and Rudy and Albert were watching this sci-fi thing on TV. This is the 50s, black and white TV. I can't remember what the name of the movie was, but it was the one where it kind of starts off this little boy looking out the window of this farmhouse over the farm, and he sees this flying saucer land in the field, and they go underground and they tunnel.
Oh,
and,
right, yeah.
You can even see the zippers on the front of the costumes of the people who played the aliens, and the big boss alien was like a big head with tentacles in a glass case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I remember that because it's time to go home. The street lights come on and stuff, and it's time for me to get home. That was the rule back then. And I had my bicycle, and I took it. And I had to go put my bike in the garage. I couldn't leave it out on the front or anything like that. It'd get stolen. And I opened up the garage door. There in the garage were standing two of those guard aliens, and the little glass case with the big head and the alien with the little tentacles and stuff in that. Two of them standing on me, just like in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I freaked, and I just kind of ran out around the house to the front, and I there's aliens in the garage. There's you're gonna put your bike away. I said, I can't. There's aliens in the garage. Don't get me. And he says, you've been watching. You're not going to watch any more sci-fi movies again. If it's going to make you this scared, that's it. I'm going to tell them there's no more scary movies for you, and put your bike away. And I just kind of went out and I lifted up the garage door about a couple feet, threw my bike under the door, slammed the door shut, and went in the house. And then I tried later approaching from the kitchen door, goes into the garage from the other end. Later, it took me a while to get up the guts, and I did, and there was three gray aliens standing in there.
Mm.
And I don't know what happened from that. I remember seeing them and going, like, oh, it's you. Like, I should know them. Or this made sense. Nobody ever seen pictures of those things back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody. I never saw anything like that in the 50s. When they did things about aliens, they were little green guys that kind of looked like the zoo or something like that,
Mm-hmm. Right.
Something like along those lines. Nothing ever looked like little grays.
Mm-hmm. That's wild. What part of New York was that?
That wasn't New York. That was Riverside, California.
Oh, that was in California. Okay. That's really interesting. So
and
nothing happened in New York. It was out in California.
Well, I don't know if anything happened. There are blank spots,
Mm-hmm.
but and I do have abilities, and sometimes I get information. That I didn't remote view or something like that, and I don't know how I got it. But I know things that just wasn't possible to know.
Right.
Wasn't physically possible, and especially for a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't explain it. I know I saw it because I drew it. I used to sit at the kitchen table with my mom. My mom was a pretty good artist, and I'd draw. And I'd draw things. Little outings. We went out in the desert, or I used to like Zorro and Davy Crockett and things like that, and space stuff. But I had a whole little cartoons of these. I call them Lepus sapiens. They were like 6 foot tall, intelligent rabbits came from all different planets and stuff like that populated the universe. And, I had my own little comic thing going, and I'd entertain my sisters with it. And we used to have a good time with that stuff. And then I added in that little gray guy, my, quote, Frome. And I saw pictures, and it's like, that happened. That's not my imagination. It's not something that just kind of filled in later. I saw what I saw. I saw what I thought I saw, but then this was really strange stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But when I close my eyes or when I go back to see, there's a little gray guy.
Yeah.
It's not the little girl whimpering behind the incinerator. It's a little gray alien. I don't know where the hell he came from. He had a crash somewhere and was hiding out from the government or what.
That's really interesting.
I don't know what the deal was. I knew he was afraid. Mm-hmm. And seeing us made him more afraid. I felt it was a him.
Mm-hmm.
But years later, and I mean only a couple of years ago, I finally read a whole thing about an interview with an alien by this woman, McElroy or something like that. And she allegedly in the 40s interviewed a gray alien named Arrow. And that made a whole lot of sense to me. That just resonated all over the place. Mm-hmm. That this was these were souls occupying an artificial body. It didn't need to breathe, didn't need to eat. They didn't even need life support in their flying saucers because they were wearing their spacesuit. It was like a biological thing they could inhabit, like possessing the body, but this was a body that had no soul or anything. It was just artificial. It was just made for them to use. Mm-hmm. And this Arrow was an engineer, and she had a lot to say about the Earth and things that were going on, and it really made a lot of sense. I don't know how much I believe of it, but I feel right with a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And usually the difference between imagination and true experience. I mean, there's a real thin line, but at the same time, we always know, especially when you're dealing with an off-world intelligence, usually.
Well, they used to do this thing with MK Ultra that I used to call the chair, especially after I got older. And, they used to use it for conditioning, part of it teaching me, like, languages and stuff like that. I'd learn different languages for different missions and stuff that I had to do to go on. Mm-hmm. I was pretty good with languages, kind of hilarious with some languages. Total languages like Chinese and Vietnamese. I could amuse the whole room with the way I try to pronounce things. Where if the word lilts upwardly, it means one thing. If the lilt goes downward, it means another thing. And if it's kind of a monotone, it means something else entirely. And I kind of screw those up a lot. But in the chair, they would sometimes they'd use hypnosis, drugs, and whatever to give you, this is men, not aliens. Mm-hmm. The only things that I remember about aliens is the two things I just told you about. That I remember for a fact they were there. And I know it because I drew it later and I can see it now, look at it, and yeah, it was there. And that's what I saw, and that was back in the mid-50s, and nobody saw anything like that in the mid-50s that you saw in any publication or media or anything like that. So it's like I didn't make it up. I didn't imagine it. It was there. There's something there. Anyway, with this chair, this is a human thing. They hypnotize you, like I say, use drugs, scopolamine, LSD, whatever. And sometimes when you went on a mission, I'd go do something, come back, and they try to give you an innocuous memory. Now, you can hear in Duncan's testimony a lot about this because it was very similar with my own. You think, I spent the summer with an uncle out in the countryside somewhere. Mm-hmm. And but that's not what happened. Those were the memories that they tried to make you think is what happened that summer, but you were off somewhere else. You were at military-based training, or you were off doing a mission or something like that. And they give you these innocuous cover memories. Mm-hmm. Yep. But if the mission was fairly boring, the cover memory stuck. as to the best of my knowledge. All right. What I remember of being out with that uncle in the summer was kind of, yeah, I think I really was. There's nothing that tells me that I wasn't anyway. But in some cases where things were horrific, where I had to kill or be killed, or there was a lot of bodies or awful things happening, you have PTSD. It's like, it's different than any other kind of experience. It's kind of, because your body, your adrenaline's so ramped up. You're like never so much alive as when you're so close to death. And your adrenaline and everything's ramped up. It's like your energy, your electricity, the bioelectricity, it's spiking so much that all of the memories, the sensations and that you experience out on that mission are burned indelibly into your hard drive. They don't go away. Right. You close your eyes and that you see them, smell them, hear them, feel them, just like you did when you were there. And that's what most soldiers' PTSD is. Like I say, it doesn't go away. Decades later, they still won't talk about it. They'll talk about it, make you feel better. Not when it's PTSD. It'll never go away. Exactly. It's always there. So I'd have these innocuous memories, but I'd close my eyes and I'd be dreaming of other things. And it's kind of, is this my imagination? I mean, I got a good imagination, but this is how I got this scar. This is how I got this set of scars. This is how, I got a lot of scars all over me from a lot of, from a lot of different things.
Right.
And I have memories of doing certain things, and those are things that I definitely do. Those are things I have training for. Duncan doesn't remember a lot of his training, or at certain aspects of it. He didn't know where he got certain martial arts techniques, where he learned the sword and this kind. He learned that from me. Some of those are signature moves. They're easy to recognize. He's had many teachers, all of us had, but certain things he learned specifically from me. He's a second generation. I'm a first generation.
Right. And let me ask you, do you think he has cloned memories? Because it almost seems like there's some kind of a cloning there with heterodyning and things like that.
I had another word for it when I was younger, and it's more in line with my being a witch and coming from the line that I do. From time to time, doppelgangers would show up.
Yeah.
I think devils of myself. So we called them, I'd tell Grandma about them, and Grandma say, it's your doppelganger. What's that? Well, it's a double of you. And sometimes they're supposed to show up when you're in trouble, or to warn you of something, or we read all kinds of tales about doppelgangers. But like I say, these are all tales. This isn't MK Ultra stuff or anything like that. This is old folk tales and stuff. I got raised on a lot of that stuff as a witch.
Right.
Fairies, and this is stuff that I've dealt with. Not great aliens, but so from time to time, I'd see my double. And I mean, it still happens to this day. People say, "Hey, I saw you downtown." It's like, I wasn't downtown today. I know it was you. It couldn't be anybody else. You're 6'5", 200 pounds. You got a ponytail hanging down your butt. Bad guys are walking away from you across the street. It was you. And then when I called, you ran away. And it's kind of like, I never run away. I don't. We're conditioned. Most human beings and animals have what they call a fight or flight response. But an ultra, especially trained like we are, we don't have a flight response. We have only a fight response.
Exactly.
Later on, they did something different to make these cheaper throwaways, but we were supposed to be survivable, which would make us more valuable to our country in serving our country. And it's like I say, this was a very expensive and drawn-out thing. So the cloning, James Rink was talking to me about that when he interviewed me. I got to say there's something to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's been other meats. There was one of my last missions. I think it was the last mission that I ran in Mexico. Was outside of Monterrey. There was a hacienda. This wasn't one where I was supposed to kill or assassinate anybody. I was supposed to break in and steal some stuff, some Aztec or Mayan artifacts that essentially the Mexican government is supposed to own. Nobody's supposed to privately own this stuff. But this guy was supposed to be using this stuff to pay for some kind of illegal something or another going on. And if he lost it, he was going to be in big, big trouble with some really nasty people. So, see, the spooks were trying to create a little war there, between factions. And, one way of doing that was me to sneak in, steal his stuff, take it back, the spooks would get it, or the government would get it back, or whatever. That wasn't my problem. I was going to get paid about $35,000 for this. That was kind of my usual thing. But something had happened. Me and an associate who was supposed to meet me outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area was a motel that we were going to meet at. We were going to stay there, get our stuff together, and then cross the border. We're going to do little wetback thing. We're not going to cross any checkpoints where people would ask for ID and there'd be a record of us crossing the border or being in any place. Back then they called us black boys. You didn't even have tags on your clothing that could be identified. And, if anything happened to you as far as the government was concerned, you just don't exist. You have no ID. There's nothing to identify you. Mm-hmm. So we met in a little place, a little motel called the Longhorn or Long Branch or something like that, just outside of that. And when we go there, there's a fire going on, and the motel room was already like little adobe houselets, little things that was your room, and it was already on. There was a fire, and of course there was a body in the fire. And this was an old. What happened is this was an old tactic that the mafia used to use. They put in light bulbs. They drill a little hole in the top, and they fill it full of gasoline, and they put it inside the lamps, and seal it up in the lights. And when somebody come in the room and turn on the lights, boom, like a big firebomb. Well, they didn't catch us. I guess the maid went in to try to make sure the room was all clean before we got there. And when she turned on the lights, boom, that was it.
Wow.
So we figured, somebody's on to us, or there's some kind of mistake. Something's wrong here. So me and my partner kind of get very, very suspicious. We're very paranoid at this point. This shouldn't be happening. But it's not the first time we were sold out. I just always managed to get my way back. The last 3 missions that I worked all went sideways. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not like bad things didn't happen on missions, but I always pulled them off. But the last 3, it seemed like people would be there waiting for us. Mm-hmm. And in this case, this was just the meeting place. We weren't even across the border yet. And so we ended up skipping the motel, make our way across the border, and instead of going straight up to the hacienda, it's kind of in a little like a desert area, but it's kind of lush around the hacienda.
And John, we're heading for a break real quick. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We'll be right back. Everybody stay tuned. We'll continue on.